You're listening to the TyePod, hosted by your friendly neighborhood PhD. Hi, everybody. It's another episode of the TyePod, and today I am joined by a special guest, Joe, who is also known as Dystrophy Dad, if you follow him on Instagram. And today we're going to talk a little bit about his work, as well as his interest in poetry. And he's done a lot of awesome pieces of work there, too, as well, that we've all read. And also talk just a little bit about like daily life and living with muscular dystrophy and everything. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. I guess just to start out, I kind of had been thinking about trying something new. If you could pick, if you like music and if you have like specific songs or artists, like if you had a soundtrack to your life, like where you are right now, is there one that comes to mind?
You know, I saw you did a Threads post recently. You're talking about the top six
Yeah.
of your music. Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't know if I have a soundtrack to my life, but
Yeah.
Dire Straits they come up, which is
Ooh.
quite ironic because I'm in anything but Dire Straits these days.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd probably Dire Straits, and I'm a massive fan of Doctor Hook. So that's
Okay.
always one, you know, whenever I can listen to them. I fell in love with them years ago after watching an old Channel 4 TV show
Mhm.
called The Young Person's Guide to Becoming a Rock Star.
Mhm.
About a band from Glasgow trying to get their stuff together.
Yeah.
And the lead singer was obsessed with Doctor Hook. So once I got my record player a few years ago, I thought, right, let's track down these albums. So I've got 8 of 10, so I'm doing pretty good.
Nice, nice. And you do the old school vinyl like discs
Yeah.
like that? Yeah. Yeah, those are
Right.
pretty sweet.
Yeah, it totally takes me back like to just being a kid. Like I remember my mum and dad having this big speaker cabinet, and they had this. I think it was Queen. It was a live album. I think
Yes.
it was Spain, Italy. It's one of these ones.
Uh-huh.
This live album, and I remember putting that on. So it was like Magic Live. It was called, and yeah, just come back to it, and even just hearing that crackle. You know, I sound
Yes.
like IP drinking audiophiles, and to be fair,
Yeah,
I drink
right.
IP as well, so maybe I am one. Get the beer to match as well, you know.
That's true. Yeah, yeah, I know exactly. I have an old antique one actually in my bedroom now that I have. It doesn't work, but it's still just the look and everything is really cool. So
Yep.
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. But that music's such a big, part of kind of the day-to-day thing for
Yep.
me. So I kind of like to ask everybody what their thoughts are on that too. So that's awesome.
Yep.
But I guess starting out kind of about you and your journey, do you want to just kind of give us a brief overview of kind of like what that's been like and what you're doing these days? And then we'll just go from there.
Yeah, so that's pretty loaded. So I'll start by talking just about myself, my condition.
Yeah.
So I live with Becker muscular dystrophy. I had the good fortune to know about that from the age of 3. The reason I say good fortune is because we already had it diagnosed within a couple of months of me being born. My granddad, who had 6 brothers, all of whom were unaffected, was what we believe to be a spontaneous mutation. So he, in his words, he just got lucky. And that's the way I like to think of it as well. You know, like I just got lucky as well. At this point in my life, I'm now married, 16 years. My dad have a 13-year-old daughter who's definitely a teenager.
Yeah.
But just going back through the journey. So again, being told early on, so I sort of knew that I was special was the word I was given. I don't believe that I'm special, just to clarify that. But it's
Exactly.
just everyone's special to their mum, right? So I grew up knowing that I had this muscle wasting condition. Because of the way Becker works, I was mostly passing non-disabled
Mhm.
for much of my life up until my teens, where I started to have a very noticeable gait, which in turn attracted a bit of attention from the wrong people. And it was just people trying to make themselves feel better by making them feel worse. So I'll be quite blunt and say high school was not a fun time for me. But when I was at high school, because things were a bit rough, I turned to writing.
Mhm.
So that made me want to write stories, poems, whatever I could.
So that's kind of where that initiated then with the poetry.
Yep. But with that, I initially started writing fan fiction. So for people who are not familiar, it's just stories based on existing characters from books, movies, video games, and all these things that you love. Specifically for me, it was Final Fantasy VII.
Sweet.
And I love the fact that I now live in a time where the remakes are all coming out. So it's such a cool thing to see these games, look the way they did in my mind's eye, like one actually in front of me. But after that, I sort of left school, messed about a little, kind of jumped from job to job, met my wife, and things just rapidly improved from there. So my wife's name's Tracy. I met her when I was 21. No, sorry, 20, before I turned 21. We just basically became really fast friends, got really close, and that was it. Within a year and a half, we had a house. Within 3 years, we were married. Kid on the way, the whole thing. So that was pretty.
Now 16 years together at this point, huh?
It's wild, I think things have passed so quickly.
Mm.
But our honeymoon was something else as well. We went to Hong Kong, Bali, and Bangkok. So it was like 5 nights in Hong Kong, a week in Bali, and then 3 nights at Bangkok before heading home.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Such an adventure.
Yeah. And the MD, I guess you had enough strength and everything at that point to be able to pretty much do all of that easily.
So I had a walking stick by that point. Which let me get about. I did have a wheelchair for sort of weaker days, but when we went away, I kind of went away with the mindset of, at this point in time, I can push through this. It's going to sting on the other side, but I would rather be lying up, with sore muscles, with all these memories in my head, the great times we had, rather than just saying no to that. So at that point, it was something I was able to do. The condition did, of course, progress. So by the time I was around 25,
Mhm.
I switched to the wheelchair more often, and that was mostly to conserve energy. That was the idea. I'd rather expend myself chasing after my daughter, who'd come along by that point, than wasting my time walking about an office. Just
Mhm.
what's the point in that? So things did progress from there,
Mhm.
and it's now at the point where I am still ambulant. I can still walk a bit, but it is a massive struggle. So I do prefer to use my wheelchair or my wheelchair and power attachment when I'm
Mhm.
feeling especially tired.
So you have kind of a manual chair, I guess, with kind of that. I want to say it's like power drive or something you can attach to it to
That's the
add.
thing. Like it gives you lift effectively. So I have a thing called a tri ride,
Okay.
and if you get a flat plane and you're as crazy as I am sometimes, you can hit 25 miles an hour.
Hey,
So
wow,
yeah,
that's
yeah. So it's like having a motorbike basically.
yeah, man, I could have used that years ago.
Yeah, to where you could do that. It's amazing. It's funny to mention that because through the job that I do,
Mhm.
so I work for a charity called Euan's Guide, and again we'll get into more detail a bit later. But through the work I do, yesterday I was at it's like a motocross track, a
Mhm.
speedway,
Mhm.
and I was there with this mobility company, and myself and a bunch of guys from the wheelchair rugby team that I'm in went along,
Mhm.
and we were making these power attachments attached to standard wheelchairs around this track. So it
Mhm.
was this red ash track, sort of bombing it round. I
Yeah,
had to save my life, and it was so cool to do.
yeah.
But the purpose of that was to show how beneficial these things can be. If you have that power
Mhm.
attachment, it can open up the world to you in ways that maybe something much larger, like a scooter or even a power chair, may not be able to.
Right, right.
That's the balance with it, and I appreciate that's sort of my needs versus others. But
It's
those attachments are amazing. They're
it's
absolutely
so
amazing.
cool that like there's so much variation I feel like now too on kind of what's offered and you can mix and match, to fit kind of what you want to do. So that's awesome. I didn't know there was one that would allow that kind of speed. But
To be
yeah.
fair, most are restricted to 50 miles an hour in the UK. It's just the one I have doesn't
Yeah.
seem. Um, so next time I'm out, I'll try and see if I can trigger a speed camera or something.
There you go. That'd be pretty good. You can
Yeah,
almost
technically.
convert it to like a vehicle at this point with that speed.
Well, to be fair, I mostly do that anyway. The nature of my job is to travel around, reviewing accessibility across the UK. So
Okay.
that takes me everywhere. And having that helps me out so much because it means that I don't have to rely on public transport as much.
How
And
like how often do you have to kind of charge or worry about battery or anything like that? Is it pretty extensive?
so I'm actually quite fortunate that I don't have to worry about that too much.
Uh-huh.
So I have two batteries. The reason I have two batteries is because an airline or a baggage handler at the airline broke my power attachment last
Hmm.
year. So
Yeah.
last July, I watched them take it from the baggage platform on the plane, lift it by the handlebars, turn to the left, and just let go. And it
Oh,
like £5,000 worth of equipment, and the guy just threw it to the ground like it was a piece of rubbish.
oh.
Because of that, though, I claimed the insurance had to go through this whole process, and
Hmm.
it was a nightmare because the baggage handlers don't have liability.
Really? I didn't
Airlines do.
realize that.
Yeah, so I think it's maybe a UK thing.
Uh-huh.
But when it comes to the airline, so the airline I flew with was a company called Jet2.
Hmm.
And I always talk about them because they're the only airline in the UK that will pay for an adapted transfer. So if you can't get on the coach to the hotel, they will
Uh-huh.
pay for a wheelchair accessible taxi that you can then take, and they won't take anything off you. Most
Yeah.
other providers will want to charge you something or leave you to pay the full cost. It's not their fault you can't take the bus.
Right, right. But wow, that's refreshing though to have one, a company that would be willing to at least try to assist in that way.
That's it. But when it comes to the whole baggage handler situation,
Hmm.
you have zero liability. The airline has liability, but
Uh-huh.
most UK airlines have liability up to the sum of £1,300. So as I
Okay.
mentioned before, the tri is a £5,000 piece of equipment.
Yeah. Wow.
Even that wouldn't cover it. So I'm having to make a complaint to people who had nothing to do with what happened,
Yeah.
you know, in order to get something sorted.
It's always
I
complicated going through multiple, avenues to get where you need.
Obviously it was wild having to do all of these things, but when I emailed Jet2
Mhm.
to complete my claim, I got an automatic response to say there was a 28-day turnaround, and I couldn't wait 28 days. So I then claimed my insurance. Luckily, I'd insured that through my house,
Uh-huh.
but that then involves insurance excess, and it brings your premium up as well. So because some guy was having a bad day, it basically cost me to have to pay out an extra £240 a year, as well as the initial £100 excess.
It's a
So
chain reaction, right? Like it's just I don't think anyone even stops to realize, how much damage they can do with something like that.
also really affects my ability to work as well. So without
Yeah.
that, I had to go to a town called Aberdeen to do some work, and Aberdeen is like this.
Yeah.
So when I came back, I definitely built some muscle. But yeah, that was utterly exhausting. But in the
Yeah.
end, Jet2 came back to me. They were going to cover the full cost, but by that point, I'd already had the insurance money through and ordered a new device. So in the end, they agreed to provide compensation.
Yeah.
So they provided me with £450 in cash to cover off the actual costing of the insurance excess and
Yeah.
a year's premiums. And they gave me a £750 voucher to use towards a holiday, which we're
Wow.
going to,
Well,
yeah, we're
they
going
at
down.
least were willing to do something there. But I mean, I think you raised a really good point though, as far as like time goes, like
Yep.
insurance claims, everything, it takes way longer than we have time for often, like we have to make do, and that's a whole set of challenges by itself.
So it's like living as a disabled person is expensive enough.
Hmm.
Some guy deciding, you know what, that guy's going to have to pay £20 extra a month for next year
Yeah.
because I can't be bothered lifting this thing. And honestly, it was so frustrating, and I can't tell you the words that I uttered in that airport. I
Oh,
was just so frustrated, and
yeah.
it ridiculous. And the thing is, we shouldn't have to be contending with this stuff.
Mm-mm.
And I like to believe that things are getting better, but then I look at the American airlines like Delta, who are so
Yeah.
proudly showing off that travel seat concept.
Right.
You know, there's a way that you can take a power chair on the plane.
Hmm.
But they're one of, I think it's 5 organizations in the US who are trying to sue their way out of
I
having
know.
stations. So you can't say, look how great we are, but also stick this finger up to the
Yeah, seriously.
same thing,
Yeah, both ways. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like the idea and all of that damage or a lot of it could be avoided. Obviously we could just take the chair on it and park it and strap it down like we do in a public bus. I mean, it's not like it's not available other places. So,
The option would be there if they wanted it to be there. So
yeah.
that's one of the things. Like the nature of my job is to focus on travel and transport locations.
Mhm.
So with that, it's given me a bit of a passion for air travel. It's also given me a passion for electric vehicle chargers.
Mhm.
Because in the UK, we have this whole new infrastructure being built that's not accessible.
Mhm.
I'm seeing instances where people are taking out accessible parking spaces to install EV chargers.
Well, that doesn't help exactly.
So it's bad enough that we can't use the chargers, but you're also then removing a space that we rely on
Mhm.
to install the chargers that we can't use.
Right.
These
Like
things are coming up.
that's the location that you choose to install that at.
Yep, and you have an option.
Oh
That there's
man.
loads of guidance. There's an organisation called Motability in the UK.
Mhm.
It's a welfare supported car scheme effectively across the UK, and they have loads of great guidance on how you can make sure that your facility is accessible, that there's enough space here and there for doors to be open, for wheelchairs to be moved.
Mhm.
Even things like getting from the charging unit to your car can be problematic depending on the
Right.
placement or whether the EV charger's on a plinth. We quite often see that. So there are so many ways that they could be accessible. There's free guidance out there,
Mhm.
but yeah, because there's no real legislation around it, people can do what they want.
Right, right. And it feels like kind of oversight in the legislation to make sure that these things are done correctly is just completely absent. I don't know how that's gonna ever work without something there.
No,
Yeah, it's
honestly,
just
it's tough. It's really tough. Like in the UK as well. Like again, don't want to go into politics too much, but at the moment there's a bit
yeah.
of a focus on disabled people within the UK, and a whole bunch of misinformation flying around.
Mhm.
It's one of these things that you'll know yourself. I think this is global, but
It
the
is.
media praise us as these like superheroes or these like scroungers is the word we use. Someone who's just on the take, someone who just wants all the free money and refuses to work, and that's absolutely not true.
Right.
But they either want you to be an athlete or someone right on the other side of the spectrum. And
Right,
it's
right.
really distressing. And right now, like I know lots of people are really scared about benefit reform that's taking place just now.
Absolutely.
And I'm based in Scotland, so we have recently devolved that. So we actually have a thing called Social Security Scotland, which has only been in operation a few years.
Mhm.
But you have the Department of Work and Pensions, which are based in England, and we effectively moved the Scottish people from there to there. So we're almost a little insulated against it,
Mhm.
but we get that funding from Westminster.
Uh-huh.
So if funding gets reduced, then we then have to start making calls like that as well. So it's a
Yeah.
scary time. It'll affect us like after people south of the border, but it'll likely still affect us. And it's a really scary time to go through these things.
Yeah, it really is, and I think what you said about kind of a global sense of everything with that, there's just I don't feel like there's a country that's kind of, at least that I know of, that is leading the way on kind of setting the standard for that. And in fact, it is like even those are devolving and reducing, rights and like you said, it's either, full inspiration because you're doing these like just, Avengers level type, activities, or you're like lowest on the bottom and you're just like taking advantage of taxpayer dollars or whatever. So, that's a good point.
And I think that's the biggest part as well, especially living with a progressive muscle wasting disease.
Hmm.
In a position where people are like, well, you could walk fine there. I seen you
Right.
running around last week. They're like, yeah, that was last week.
Right.
Today I can't stand up, and
Right.
it's a disability like much of us live with. And when people see that, they can't equate those two things. It's
Right.
like when you sit down in a wheelchair, you give up the ability to walk.
Mhm.
Just that assumption that you can't stand at all.
Right.
You know,
Right.
yeah,
It's that binary, like either, you're fully able-bodied or you're not, and
yeah,
it's I know that's not true. Like I'm conserving energy by using a
yep.
wheelchair now, and maybe I can, do other things later. And what's the point of even judging that in the first place? Like from an outsider, like why would that be even? I mean, why do people go there in their minds? I never understand that
I don't think you
process.
until it comes for you, and that's kind of one of the
Yeah.
things I'm shouting about is that you could become disabled at any moment. That
Right.
Everyone's an accident, fall,
I mean, there's
even just
hundreds of reasons, right? Like,
trigger away from that. And yeah, like you
yeah.
said, so many different ways that you could acquire a disability that it doesn't make sense to me that people would either be against us or wantonly like protest against accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's so bizarre because the minute this affects you, then you'll realize how important it is.
Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't take, many, I guess everyone I feel like is close to somebody with a disability. It seems like whether it's family or friends or like maybe even a coworker, like their family. I mean, there's disability is kind of a common connection across, every
Yep.
everybody really.
As it comes with age ultimately as well, you know, so you will lose ability over time and potentially require things like hip replacements, require use of a wheelchair. You know, these things come for most of us. I
Yeah.
think I had a friend, well, I still have a friend, he's still here. But my friend Charlie, he once said there's was it 99% chance you'll become like me, but
Hmm.
there's a chance that I could become like you. And
Yeah.
that's true. Just because you have your health, so to speak, doesn't mean that you'll have that forever. Doesn't mean that something won't change. That then means you're relying on support.
Right.
When you get to that point where you've not been supporting that push, you're effectively screwing over your future self.
That's a good point.
You know, it's that way. This groundwork is here in case you need it, rather than, oh, we don't want that here at all.
Right. Right. I mean,
You know?
that's exactly like, it's almost like if they would get behind the people that have the disabilities now, it's only going to help, them and everybody at the same time. So it's a win-win as far as I'm concerned. So
So yeah, like do the groundwork first, and it's always that argument that it costs more to retrofit accessibility as well. So if you can build it into what you're doing, then why wouldn't you? Why would you want to deal with that nonsense like 10 years down the line?
yeah. Yeah.
You know,
There's brand new buildings still being built that don't even have a push button entry.
Yep.
It's just ridiculous how, and how much time it takes like to retrofit that to fix it afterwards. I had that happen at the university I was working at. I was just dumbfounded why they, didn't have that to start with. And it was a year plus, I think, before it was installed. So it's happening everywhere.
Yep. Like again, I see it so much just with the nature of my job, as I say as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like one thing that, like, so the organisation I work for, I'm just going to mention them because I keep alluding to them.
Mm-hmm.
We're called Euan's Guide. We're named for a man, Euan McDonald, MBE, to give him his full title. Euan acquired motor neuron disease, or was diagnosed motor neuron disease at the age of 29. He lived with it for 21 years before passing away last August. The organisation that we operate is a resource where disabled people can leave reviews of places they've been to from the position of access and note what it was like. So explain, what were the staff like, what was the venue like, what was access like, and it's one of these ways for disabled people to share information amongst themselves, which then empowers other disabled people to go out. So that's the nature of it. One thing we are known for is our Red Cord card campaign. I'm glad I said that right because I always mix up card and cord when I say it.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Effectively, this is a card that has a little section cut out that's used to hang on the red emergency cord that you'd find in a lot of accessible toilets. Mm-hmm. And it encourages it to touch the floor. And the whole point of that is, if someone falls, then they can pull it. That's
right. Well,
so
that's a level of access that, when you're on the ground, that could be everything.
Yep, then we've heard stories about this. There was a recent BBC News story, and it's about a disabled club night.
Uh-huh.
Right? Like exactly what it sounds like, a club night that disabled people, wheelchairs, etc. went to. And there was a guy who went to the toilet and had managed to fall, and no one came for him for 9 hours.
Ooh.
He was in a club. The music's just booming. No one noticed.
And just laying in there. Wow.
Yep. And that's because the pull cord was up out the way.
Right.
It's these things like it generally does make a difference. But the whole purpose of me going to that was I spend a lot of time taking pictures of accessible toilets. Mm-hmm. The reason I have a work phone is so that my own phone, in a case of, here's my wife and kid. Oh wait, that's a toilet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah. I can imagine that would raise some eyebrows as you're swiping.
Yeah, it's like my official title is toilet photographer. I think they should call me that.
Yeah.
But when I go to these places, it's the accessibility being there, but not being sufficient. Mm-hmm. So what I'm finding is we have a thing in the UK, I'm not sure how global it is, called a radar key. Mm-hmm. Effectively, it's a long key that has a large handle on it, and it's equipped specifically for disabled people, so they can maybe handle it that bit more because of the sort of wider grip on it. Now, these are sort of commonplace in a lot of accessible toilets across the UK. But I go to some places where you put the key in the door. Go to another place where you put the key in the wall. Mm-hmm. I go to another place where it doesn't take the key at all, but there's a buzzer on the wall that you have to pick up a handset, dial in to get a code to put in the door. So, by the time you've done that, you've pissed yourself ultimately. It's
complicated.
It's like an escape room, it's like you're trying to break into this place.
Yeah. When you're also trying to keep from wetting yourself, basically.
Yeah, that's the thing. That there's these barriers here. So, quite a few years ago, we do that to make sure the facilities aren't used by people who shouldn't be using them. Mm-hmm. And then you invariably find yourself stopping the people who need to use them from using them. Plus, there's also something about having to put your hand up to tell someone you need a pee.
Right. Yeah, that's a little bit
It's just that you don't need to know that I need to go in there for my business.
Right, right. And I mean, nobody else does, right? Like it's not,
Exactly. Yeah, like
yeah,
the minute you leave school, like when you leave, like we call it primary school. I imagine you guys call it junior high, maybe. Where you
yeah,
print
yeah.
a toilet pass
Yep,
or hall pass.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The time you're out there, you shouldn't have to alert another adult that you need to go to the toilet.
That makes me think about the classrooms that I was in during college. Like the ones inside the buildings obviously don't have the push button, so you're sitting there like trying to get your teacher's attention in the middle of class, and here you are like 25 plus years old trying to be like, hey, can you open the door so I can run to the bathroom real quick? So it's definitely yeah, it's embarrassing to have to do that. So I get what you're saying.
That's why. So again, it's just funny. Like I've got a collection now just of different locks, and different mechanisms that are used, and every other one I go into has that red cord tied up out the way, and
Yeah,
it just annoys me so much, and I can't
completely
even.
out of reach for the people that need it.
That's it. And it's just that way. Why have it if you're going to do that? Like
Yeah.
why disable us further?
It's almost like pointing the finger, almost making fun of it in a way, where they install those.
Again, that's what we do. We sort of draw attention to these things.
Yeah,
Again, like that's the nature of the organization I work
that's
for.
huge.
Just since I'm talking about work, so I feel like I'm leading you on this. If you want me to shut
Honestly,
up,
that's perfect because stories like that trigger so many other points I think that I already was going to ask you about. So like I really enjoy having that kind of organic route, with the conversation.
I'm glad because a big part of my job is talking as
Well,
well.
yeah, and honestly, there's I don't know of too many companies that do that kind of thing, and it's I mean it would make such a difference here, to have somebody go through. I mean, hotels, businesses, I mean, there's so much, and then lifts, all these lifts that are like outdated, that have problems that don't work anymore, but they say they're ADA accessible, which is, I mean, ADA accessible doesn't really mean too much in terms of making it truly available to everybody with a disability, obviously. Yep. So, I think having that kind of access, would just be huge in so many places.
I'm with you on that. And like one of the things I subscribe to is the value of experience. I did a talk at a Muscular Dystrophy UK event recently, and it was talking about, so again, another tangent alert.
I love tangents.
Yep. So so I was doing a talk there about the value of experience. Now, I feel like I tell this story a lot, but it's mostly because I think people need to hear it, really for the sake of representation and just for removing stigma. So mental health is a massive thing for me. About 8 months after my daughter was born, I started to develop these thoughts that I wasn't good enough as a dad, that my being there was actually problematic for the people around me because they then had this additional burden of dealing with me whilst my wife tried to raise a kid. So we get to that point where I'm just like, I'm this close, just thinking that I need to take this step, And it started to build up initially that I was coming home from work and I would just drive a little further past the house, then double back, further and further, until one day I just drove a little too far. And it was around December time. When it was December time? Well, that was a later period actually. That was like leading up to, in fact. But I stopped in a park and just sat for a bit and then decided to go home and tell my wife that I was having these thoughts that I wanted to die, which was wild. Like, I always say this as well, no one ever tells you what disability does to your mind. It's generally, you have this condition, it's progressive, you'll become a wheelchair user, and that's what will happen.
But mentally, you're fine. Like everything's
normal. Like, you know yourself. You have that sense of loss when you lose like certain abilities too, or even since you're losing walking range, you feel it when you feel like, okay, I'm getting shorter and shorter, and how far I can go. But I did that. Spoke to my wife, got some assistance, which was the right thing to do. And because my work weren't the best at it, dealing with it, I set up an accessibility network there. And I just wanted to sort of set up this disability and mental health network that was a way of supporting other people who may be going through these things and may not know how things go, in the workplace.
Yeah.
I also became a union rep at one point as well, just mostly to get that experience, but also to provide that representation as a wheelchair user of the type of person that you can speak to. So from that, I set up that network. I moved on to a fintech bank called Monzo, did something very similar there as well, and then became a vulnerability specialist because having that experience of feeling suicidal gave me the ability to speak to people who are feeling suicidal without
What was the response like on that from other people?
But actually taking that job up. So my wife was a massive support in me doing that. I think it was by that point and doing the accessibility network at the previous place that I'd started to realize you can build these connections. If you tell the stories, it will connect with someone in the room.
Yeah.
So my wife was massively supportive of that. When I took that role, I excelled pretty quickly. So it's so weird. So in Monzo, everyone's customer operations are cops, right? Cops get badges, which so a badge is effectively your skill set. So what skill set do you want to push yourself to? And I went towards that, and I became a vulnerable customer expert within 3 months. So that was effectively someone who was well trusted, someone who was well respected, and someone who was trusted to train other people. So someone who could work alone in these difficult scenarios. And I will say it's difficult. Like working for a bank, you don't think that you're going to be on the phone with someone, saying that they're going to kill themselves, or someone who's going to do something unless you give them money. Like
Right.
then there's the other side where people are being taken advantage of or scammed. So there's a massive element of vulnerability that takes place there, because vulnerable people have bank accounts too. And literally anyone can become vulnerable for any reason too, very much like they said with disability. So in doing that, love what I did, felt that I wanted to do what I could with that skill. And the job was fully remote, so I missed being in a room with people. So I made a move to another organisation, which I didn't initially on paper. It was the same role, but didn't agree with the company's practices in a lot of ways. And again, I'm not going to get into too much detail.
Yeah.
That made things difficult. At that same time, I then became chair of their accessibility network. It kept me in there. I really had to get out of that place though. So I was having a really difficult time. And the job I have now, I saw advertised on the day it closed.
Oh, wow. Okay. So just right before it was gone, basically. Yeah.
So there was a closing date, but not a closing time. So I was like, okay, so it's not saying it shuts at 5. So I can get this in, and went along with the interview. So first one was a sort of video call. The second one was 1-to-1, and I was offered the job within an hour of leaving the building, which was absolutely astounding.
Yeah.
The reason I'm telling that story is my experience of writing, just in the whole Dystrophy Dad thing, but going through that journey as well of having these negative experiences that then became something beneficial that I could use to engage with others,
Right.
led to this job. And I think that experience speaks for itself, that going through all of that put me in a position where I consider myself good at my job, because I really care about it. I might care about it a little too much, if I can be frank about it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it becomes something that's, so ingrained and important to you. And then when you realize that it's, important to so many other people, that's just a natural, I mean, it just fits, right? And everything kind of makes sense where you arrived now from all the things that you've gone through with that.
Yeah, I've collected experiences and it's sort of paid off on this side.
Yeah.
But muscular dystrophy talk, I actually had a talk written out. And the night before I thought, I don't want to do this. So I just ripped up my notes and thought, right, what do I actually want to talk about here? Scribbled a few things, just went in and pretty much freestyled it. But I got the best response. But the whole point of that whole conversation was that my experiences held the value of giving me, first of all, like the outlet through writing. So that was important to me. But also got me this job, which is my dream job. It really is. It's the best job I've ever had. And honestly, I just can't tell you just how much I love this thing. But at the Muscular Dystrophy event, what I was trying to get across was your experiences have value. So whether that's you talking to a friend about this place you went to where the staff were really nice, or talking about something really personal, like mental health related, those experiences have value that helps other people.
Absolutely.
And the whole purpose of my talk was to effectively bring it back to what the charity I work for. So as I said, we're a charity, not a business. We want other people to see that your experiences have value. And if you'd like to share these experiences, there's also this other platform that you can use.
Yeah.
That could be our site. It could be your own site. It could be social media, which it was when I started this role. And the whole social media thing was exceptionally rewarding. Like when I started doing the whole Dystrophy Dad thing. So I'd had this name in my head for years. I set up a YouTube channel that I didn't use, but I just love the alliteration, Dystrophy Dad.
Well, the alliteration, right? Like you get that going.
Yeah, just I get a tingle whenever I hear a bit of alliteration as well. So that came about mostly because I wanted to give something back and I wanted to write about my experiences. Not long after doing that, I started the Instagram page too. And I started to get engagement from people who were newly diagnosed, or people whose kids had been diagnosed, or people who'd lived with it and were just having a tough time. Having these people reach out to you just for that support, again, brings back that whole thing of your experiencing having value.
Right.
So some of the articles I've written as well are about really tough conversations. So due to the sort of genetic setup of muscular dystrophy, Becker and Duchenne, whereby females are carriers and males tend to have it, I had that conversation with my daughter back when I was working at that bank. But by expressing how I managed that situation and how it brought us closer together and the ways in which you might want to approach it, that my tip for that whole thing was make it a positive memory, enshrine it in something good. So that could be something as silly as going out for ice cream. Go out for ice cream, sit, talk, go to the beach, go to the park. Be in a place that has some joy.
Yeah.
Versus being at home, sitting someone down in the kitchen and going, okay, so I have this, you have my faulty X chromosome, so you are a carrier, and there's a 50-50 chance that your son will have this. Now go tidy your room.
Right. Carry on with you. Yeah.
And I'm going to tell this quick story. All my stories take forever, but this is.
I love that. I like that.
I did this training thing. It was like a press training thing through work that was supported, and we identified that I'm a storyteller, and I'm comfortable with that. But that whole day, so I had a really difficult day at work. Still at that Monzo Bank, and it wasn't difficult because of the organisation. It was just because of some of the really heavy things I was talking about, including people sending me pictures of really grotesque things. Because they were being threatened, so they thought they'd share the pictures with me without, trigger warning.
Yeah.
Had a tough day, and my daughter questioned me on my lunch break. And she said, Dad, you know how you have brown eyes and I have brown eyes? I'm like, yeah. Does that mean I also have muscular dystrophy?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And as I said, it was my lunch break. So I said to my daughter, like, what we'll do is we'll pick up this later. So I'd like to have a proper talk with you because I don't
Yeah.
want to say something then rush off. We'll go out and do that. So I'll go back on shift and I happen to have a meeting with my team manager. And her name's Haley. Haley is amazing.
Hmm.
She had asked me about my day and I mentioned what had happened.
Hmm.
Her response was, okay, so you're taking the day off. I'm like, what? She's like, no annual leave, nothing. Don't worry about that. Just
Yeah.
you're taking the day off. What's your plan? And I said, okay, there's a place near me called Irvine. It's about 20 miles away,
Hmm.
sort of beach town, you know. We're going to go through there and get an ice cream out of a place called Vanilla Joe's and go down to the beach. And we'll,
Yeah.
we'll do that, get a happy memory. And my boss said, right, okay, that's great. Right, you go off and do that. So I kind of shut my laptop
Wow.
and kind of did that. And it was lovely having that support.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say that's some kind of support it's kind of unheard of, it seems like.
That is just like most people are like, well, that's personal. You deal with your own crap in your own time.
Yeah.
But she's like, no, no, let you do that. So that's what we did. We went through there, we picked up an ice cream, and we went to, there was a beach nearby. There was a car park here, and it was a really nice night.
Hmm.
So everyone was there, like everyone. There was a woman that I always mention this just for the whole visual aspect, was walking about with a wine glass that she clearly brought from home.
Hmm.
She just like wandered about this car park,
Yeah.
after. And I thought, right, okay, it's too busy here. Let's go just down to the waterfront. So we get down to the waterfront, and as we're there, we see the waves coming in and just brushing over a dog shit
Hmm.
and back out. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's horrible. So I'm like, okay, right, we can't have this conversation here.
Right.
We moved again, went up to the harbour, and there was some benches there.
Uh-huh.
I sat down with my daughter, and I just explained to her sort of how it sits. And I set up, can I explain it quite succinctly as, I have a faulty X, your mum has two healthy X's.
Hmm.
You have mums, and one of mine. If you have a wee boy, he could have that one, in which case he has muscular dystrophy, or he could get that one,
Hmm.
in which case he doesn't. And it was just as simple as that, just that sort of like that illustration of X's moving, and that was enough. But after that point, she told me that she felt closer to me now, and that we had something really special in common.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
that's a core memory that you'll both always, have too. And I think that's such a great thing that you took that environment and that particular event as a time to, it was a good way to do something that small that you both enjoy, but also just have a honest conversation, and I mean, I'm sure that years later has already, helped with everything too, I would imagine.
that's absolutely has, and kind of what you said, that whole core memory concept. I think most of us just have that from inside out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and it's kind of like, it's even just talking about that movie, how you've got a memory that alters color because of the tinge of sadness in it.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. So now we both remember where we were when that conversation was held, but
Mhm.
also that was reinforced by something positive, rather than, as I said, being just an over the table discussion of,
Right.
yeah,
And just
yeah,
casually dismiss it afterwards, right? Like yeah.
that's it. We both get to process it, and it's funny because I'd had that in my head for so long that I was worried about having that chat,
Yeah.
and the chat presents itself. But I had written about that. It was a blog that I'd written a good while ago now called Passing on the Cards. And it's just about that. And that's what I like about sharing these experiences, because it gives people who are struggling, like, how do I have this conversation with a young kid? How do I tell them? And there's a lot of guilt as well. Like, my dad blames himself despite the fact that
Yeah.
it doesn't come from him.
Right.
Exactly. My mum was the carrier.
Right.
So it is that. And then there's an element in my heart where I'm like, oh, well, I'm passing this on. Am I being selfish? But then I realize, would I rather have my kid on the planet or not at all? And
Right.
that's a big answer right there.
Right. I totally that makes so much sense. And I think sharing those kind of lived experiences like that are huge to me. And that's kind of why I was kind of pushed into this social media thing. Just I think
Yep.
it was like an instinctual thing that I just felt, after I'd gone through quite a bit of stuff after I got my PhD and not being able to work, and progression of symptoms, and then realizing, well, it's not a waste. Like everything brought, kind of me to this point. And I started finding other people like you and others in the like MD community, and these stories are just like, they're just honest like experiences, and you can't find it really anywhere else. Like I'd never really connected with anyone with MD, outside until this with social media. So I just think that, having you on and telling those kinds of things, and realizing that because you have MD, you can be a father, you can have a great,
Yep.
family experience, and, and have like a really deep connection to, to your family too, that I think a lot maybe don't have. So, I think that's so great.
But yeah, as we say, it's always about representation.
Yeah.
And that's what I like as well. And I like to believe that inspiration is a byproduct,
Yeah.
not intentional. So, like, I know that for some people, they'll see me in my wheelchair and be like, ugh. Or other people see me in the wheelchair and be like, that guy's cool. But I'm very aware of the fact that I'm a guy with a Scottish accent,
Mhm.
with a beard, who drives a motorbike wheelchair, There's
Yeah.
that part. People will look and be like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's not why I have these things. I'm not trying
Right.
to. But ultimately, you can inspire people through the things you do without necessarily setting out to inspire people.
Well, just
And
being who you are, right? Like,
it's like everyday heroes. You
Yeah.
know,
That
that's
actually that's a good segue. I was going to ask you about the whole Sons of Dystrophy thing and getting that started up, and if you wanted to share a little bit about how you did that
yeah, no, I love talking about Sons of Dystrophy mostly because I love the name. I've got a
and the
feeling that
logo too.
yeah, that may have been AI. Don't at me.
Yeah, I didn't hear that.
But if you look close enough, you'll see it's got the wrong number of ribs. But the idea was
Oh
just to do that.
man,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was at the point where like AI was pretty much in its infancy as
Hmm.
far as commercial use was.
Well, I may or may not have used that for my my little avatar on the TyePod show. So yeah, I'm with you
Yeah.
there.
But at the time, so it was. I always say during the pandemic, and I don't want to say that because COVID very much affects people to this day. It's
Yeah,
not something that's just gone away, despite what people would like you to think, or despite what Trump said to a politician recently about wearing a mask. I've not seen one of them in years.
and
Yeah,
it's not going to go away completely, I don't
yeah,
think.
it never is. So that's why I hate saying it during the pandemic. But
Yeah.
it was at the point of the pandemic, rearing its ugly head, that I got together with a few guys. So there's Brad Miller from my
Hmm.
Becker featured before, and Clay of Cognizant Clay, who we kind of met through social media,
Hmm.
decided to try and build this thing together. Brad lives with Beckers, hence my Becker story. Clay lives with the Shen, and we're quite literally three guys with muscular dystrophy. And I watched that whole lot of Sons of Anarchy on the lead up to it.
Hmm.
I just thought like this would be a cool concept. Just that again, wordplay is a big thing. Just being a
Yeah.
writer. I'm like, right, Sons of Dystrophy, right? What could we do with this? And then I had to think, right, well, we could use it to just try and spread a bit of awareness of what we do, but also to try and bring people together.
Hmm.
Very earliest version of Sons of Dystrophy, it was all three of us still, but we had a post every single day. We had a schedule, and it was mostly because like, I wasn't working, the other guys had free time as well. I
Yeah.
just like been furloughed and sort of like let off work because of COVID. And we had a really heavy schedule with it. And we got loads of traction, loads of people wanted to be involved. We featured people, we had different shout outs for even different disabilities at different points as
That
well.
was really great too. Like I was, loved how you had so many different ones that you brought attention to.
But we had to effectively do like a retake at one point.
Yeah.
So with Sons of Dystrophy, we realised it was a heavy workload for all of us. So we wanted to sort of bring it down. So it was about maybe a year or so ago now that I effectively wiped the page and we changed the structure of it. So just going back to sort of what the concept was,
Hmm.
the concept of chapters, in the same way that motorcycle gangs have chapters, having your chapter be your form of muscular dystrophy, that was a very early concept. And the whole idea there was to give a sense of pride as well. So it's like you're part of this exclusive gang and you
Hmm.
represent this chapter. And I think it just adds an extra element to it. But fast forwarding to now, when we did the revamp, we made it more singular. So we'd focus on a person a week, and that person would tell us about themselves, what they're up to, where to
Hmm.
find their source, or anything else they might be involved in, and we give them their chapter badge as well. And I felt it was just the coolest way to find other people like you and learn what our lives are like as well. It's a bit like what you said. Like, I had the assumption that no one would want to marry me. I'd never have a girlfriend when I was younger because
Hmm.
who wants to me? And then I'm on the other side of this. And that's what it comes down to. It's about showing how valuable our lives are and the cool things that a lot of us do. And it's like disabled people generally are resilient and creative because we have to be. We have to find solutions.
Right.
Most of the people I know with disabilities are actually amazing people. And I think again, it's that whole side effect. Like they don't set out to be amazing. They don't set out to inspire. But through the things they do, even like yourself, having the podcast, like these
Yeah.
are things that inspire others. But Sons of
Right.
Dystrophy shortly is just a way of bringing people together and sharing that sense of pride, and showing what we are capable of as disabled people.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and the whole adapting, to your environment, kind of like I always think of it, you're becoming essentially a new person in a lot of ways, each time that you have to kind of change who you are based on what the MD or whatever the disability, has caused. So
Yep.
I think that's very true. And I think the way you like highlighted each, oh, there goes my corgi, of course, crazy barking. But yeah, I think that's just so cool that you highlight the different types of MD. And so like each person, whatever the diagnosis is, feels sort of that pride, but it's also a
Yep.
collective too, like it all comes back to kind of the whole disability community has these things I feel like that make us, really unique and interesting just because of what we do and what we like and what we're passionate about,
Yep.
So I think that effort with Sons of Dystrophy was just really nice to see, and it was fairly early on too, and when I was getting into social media. And so I found it like really good for networking and, getting to meet people with common things. So yeah, I just like that.
What's like since this job as well, I've been able to meet up with people that I've met through social media.
Mhm.
So during my job, I was in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and there's Conor Macaulay. I think you may have spoken to
Yeah.
Conor.
Mhm.
So
I think
Conor
he's
and I,
actually coming up on an episode pretty soon. Yeah.
okay, cool. So Conor and I met up in Belfast to get the train up from Ireland to Northern Ireland,
Mhm.
and just had like a really good time. Then I've got a friend, John Whitehead, who I've been friends with through social media for ages as well. He plays wheelchair basketball, and he came up this way, so I went to see him. And then a few months ago, last month, I was in Birmingham, and he came through to see me. And
Yeah.
I just having these opportunities to just meet up with just these
In
people.
real life. Yeah.
And you know what the best thing about it is, though? It's not awkward. You know, like I remember
Yeah.
being a kid when the internet was new, and don't meet people off the internet. You know, and like I
Yeah.
meet people off the internet. Not that I'm saying everyone should do that,
Yeah.
but it's so cool to be able to like, have these interactions with like really cool people. And
Yeah.
like they become your friends. They really do. And
It
I've said that my friendship circle feels like it's shrinking a bit as I get older, and like I
right.
mean, the conversation privately too. But yeah, that like when you do that, but then you think, actually, I know this guy and I know this guy, right? And I don't mean you like don't message each other every day, but I still consider you
True.
a friend. Well, and if there was something that you were struggling with that maybe I could help make sense of,
Mhm.
I appreciate you reaching out to me. Same way I'm sure that you'd be fine if I did that with you.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I
So,
mean, it's kind of just an unspoken thing that I think, that kind of interaction, and we kind of understand, like what others are going through, where it doesn't have to be an everyday thing to be really, have some kind of friendship, but you
yep,
know that you're not going through it alone, and you can reach out to somebody else that kind of knows, what you're going through. And especially I was thinking back to what you're talking about earlier too, with the mental health and kind of the sort of, thoughts of like going to that place where you might not want to be here, or, and I definitely, as someone who, I never thought I would have those feelings. I did at times, over the years, when it got to be too much. So, I definitely, I think, again, just going back to sharing experiences, I think that really helps, even in a
yep.
podcast, as I'm, just visiting with you about it. It's something that I think is really helpful to me too. So, and I'm sure others that listen will really appreciate that.
I hope so. Again,
Yeah,
that's why I talk about it. I'll keep talking about it until I don't have to. And
exactly.
the way things are in the world, I'll probably have to talk about this for the
It's
rest
not
of
going to go away.
It's not. But again, if you have someone eager to have that conversation, and these were problems I had. So in the job that will remain nameless, I got asked why I got into vulnerability as a whole
Uh-huh.
member of the team. And I explained, kind of what I went through. And after doing that, I had a meeting shortly after with a manager who told me that some of the conversations I was having were a bit heavy.
Mhm.
But like they asked me like what motivates me. And that actually became a poem. It's
Yeah.
called
Isn't it
there's,
nice how things like that can just find their way into a poem? Yeah.
it's like I can't remember like my poetry books are sort of over here, but the last line of that poem was like, if you think my conversations are heavy, tell me
Yeah.
how much does a dead body weigh, and I had that.
Mhm.
Like that's why I talk about these things because it makes people feel awkward when
Right.
people are talking about it. But see if you're going through that or you're anywhere in that thought process, having one guy go, yeah, I felt like that, or I still feel like that,
Yeah.
has value. It makes you feel less of an alien ultimately, because you know that other people are actually experiencing this, that they felt
Right.
that way. They might feel that way again, but
And
you
it's
haven't.
and it's not wrong. I mean, it's just, part of, I think, some of our experiences. Just go there, and it's not something to be ashamed of, I don't think either.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I wear that stuff with pride, and that's why I have these conversations. And even talking about the poetry book, so that was last year I published that.
Mhm.
I called it Joe Logue Writes Volume 1 because I was trying to urge myself to write a Volume 2. Still
Yeah.
haven't. Let's not talk
Yeah.
about that. But
Is it in the works? Like, do you have kind of some days you write poetry that you think that might end up in another
I did,
volume?
the
Yeah.
first one was written when I was in a really dark place. And it is so bizarre. So see, I was signed off from work from the place I don't want to mention
Right.
before I started this role that I'm in now. And I had so much like time there, but I was just so down. I was just like, what am I doing here? Why am I working here? Like, what is my life right now? So I went through all these things I'd written, and I found a lot of poetry about mental health, sort of dealing with a disability, just really dark things. And I put them together into this book, and I put it out there. So I self-published it, and I did this smart thing through Amazon. So through Amazon, you can order author copies, which you can get sent out. So it's about £2.50 here per book. So I would spend like £25, and get those 10 books.
Yeah.
And I would go to the poetry events and sell the books for say £5. So effectively make my money back, double out,
Yeah.
and then reinvest that into doing it. So it gave me a way to sort of hand these things out to people to actually sign them. And
Gotcha.
but with the book itself, I released that. And after I released that, it was almost like I just passed out like all these negative, horrible thoughts. Like I'd given them up
Right.
and changed rapidly. So obviously I got this job. The week that I left the other job, I was on the radio performing my poetry, which
Yeah.
was bizarre. What else happened that week? Oh yeah, and I entered a poetry slam as well
Oh
in my
yeah.
local town. And it was the first one that I'd been to where I could access the stage in my wheelchair.
Nice.
You know,
So all
the rest
these
of
things start happening that, yeah.
it happened at once, and then the job took off. And I think, see, going through what I'd been through with that other role, genuinely hated it.
Yeah.
But it gave me that drive, right? I don't want to go back there. So let's
Right.
make a this. And I went from having anxiety over answering the phone to doing a talk in front of 100 people at a time.
Yeah.
But I think the last time I doubted myself was probably around the time that book came out.
Yeah.
But the point there is like by creating this thing and putting it out there, it was almost like I was able to let go of it.
Right. I
But
mean, that was almost like a huge like therapeutic, like kind of
it was just
remaking yourself. Yeah.
so good to be able to get that out and change your
Oh
life. So
yeah.
is going to be more humorous. A lot of my stuff so I'll go back on the poetry thing.
Mhm.
So I'd been writing poetry for years. I'd been desperate to compete in a poetry slam. And when people think of poetry slam, they either think of So I Married an Ex-Murderer,
Mhm.
yep, or they think, I assume either 21 Jump Street or So I Married an Ex-Murderer.
Mhm.
But I'd always seen it as this really cool thing, like people going up and putting themselves out there, and being
Yeah.
brave enough to share the work that they created. And I thought, right, I really want to do that, but I was far too scared. I went along to a poetry slam that had an open mic section in the middle.
Mhm.
And I had a friend who, his name's Sean Moore. We have a term in Scotland called a Makar, and a Makar is effectively a regional poet.
Uh-huh.
So he's the poet for Renfrewshire, which is the area where I stay.
Oh, okay.
I went on to that night, and he says, "Look, Joe, I know that you've wanted to do some of your stuff. I'm just going to put you up there."
Yeah.
And for a moment, I was like, "Oh no!" I was like, "Okay, let's do it. Let's just do it." So bizarrely, I don't know why. I think it's maybe just because I was thinking about going to this event.
Mhm.
I rehearsed this poem that I'd written about my granddad. So as I mentioned before, my granddad has the same, or had, sorry, he passed away.
Yeah.
The year I get mad, it's selfish of him. But he passed away. But he was obsessed with cowboy movies and like cowboy books. I used to go to the library and check them out in my card and sort of bring them over to him.
Yeah.
A poem called The Ballad of the Legless Kid. And it's this idea of him dying. So he died really suddenly.
Hmm.
I didn't like his ending, so I thought, right, okay, what would he do? So this whole concept of him going into a saloon bar
Uh-huh.
in heaven, and he starts an argument with the barman, and the barman happens to be God.
That makes
And
sense.
yeah, it's just about like he was always a tough guy.
Yeah.
And I think one of the lines in it was, "I have to tell you, Sonny Jim, that I admire your goal,
Mhm.
but who heaven and the earth do you think gave you those balls?"
Yeah.
That's what
Oh, that's good.
it was in my head, so I thought, right, we'll do it. And I started it, and then
Yeah.
I forgot my lines halfway through and had to pull my phone out
Oh no.
and just read it. But I got to the point I get sparkled by the lights, and kind of lost
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But after doing that, I thought, right, okay, I can actually do this.
Yeah.
So I tried to just do a few more open mic nights, and then I entered a poetry slam and came in second last. But
Yeah.
it just so happened there was another one on the following night at another venue,
Uh-huh.
and I came in second.
Hey, wow, that's
No, it was that was the boost that I needed. I'm like,
the
right,
jump.
okay, so
Yeah.
I can do this. And people like to hear what I'm saying, especially like the early stuff was really humorous.
Yeah.
I think that'll make its way back into the second book when it comes out.
Hmm.
But there are several concepts I have. So the second book is that humorous one.
Yeah.
But what I really want to do is I have a concept I've been working on for ages, and it's almost like an autobiography.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember a lot of my childhood. I think depression has that tendency to sort of block
I
memories
think
out,
I
which
have a little bit of that. Yeah. Yeah.
really sucks. But I'd like to write a biography of a man with my muscle wasting disease from basically birth to death.
Uh-huh.
So I've got 20 poems that are sort of sculpted out, and the idea is to sort of have, like, envision my mum and dad's worries about me as a kid.
Uh-huh.
They have this great news, they're going to have a kid, and then there's that immediate thing, oh no, the kid's going to have this, but they're not actually realizing, that kid can do a lot of great things.
Right. Right.
So like from the angle of, I remember what it's like being, a dad of a newborn and what that was like, and then taking it to this person's life to the point they get married, they have kids themselves, and the ultimate ending is that person dies
Right.
in a good age, and the last poem is a eulogy that's
Okay.
the character's wife. So it's this sort of it's my 8 Mile basically.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Based on
are you trying to kind of like, I guess, be like somewhat objective, or like you're the one like viewing this happen and you're writing it in that way, or are you writing it more like this is actually you?
So mostly like it'll be me, but I like the
Yeah.
idea of sort of coming in and out, sort of like seeing this mum and dad crying because the doctor delivers the news in a really stupid and bad way.
Right.
And then
And always in the most negative way possible.
that's it.
Yeah.
And then that progression to, okay, so like, he's out in the world now, what's he doing for himself? But like should we like keep him safe and keep him home? Should we let him go out and kind of that whole thing?
Mhm.
And I'd like to sort of show the whole story of a person sort of life to death within these 18, maybe 20 poems.
Yeah.
That I think there's a lot of power in that. Like I kind of got inspired by the fact that Brad had written down his experiences.
Yeah.
So Becker story, but I don't have those experiences to draw from because, as I said, sort of that black hole that's in my mind.
Right. Right.
That's what I want to do. So those are my sort of main writing projects just now. I'd like to get the sequel out by the end of the year, but I feel that the autobiography or the sort of semi-biography
Mhm.
take just a little while to get together.
Yeah.
I'm going to do shouting and screaming about that because I really like that idea.
Wow, I think that's really cool. That you're taking, I guess, things that other friends have done and tailoring it to kind of sharing your story in your way. I think that's such a neat way to do it. And even though like we have these commonalities, I think the ones of us that do write books and put them out there, they're unique, to us, and they bring different things that maybe can help somebody else in some way. So I think poetry, for me, I've only just started doing some free form stuff in the last year and a half or so, and it's just like it's amazing how you can let go of things that maybe you've been holding on to forever. Like things, I write things from childhood, that I'm just like, wow, I can kind of let that version of me go now and keep going. So I think there's some kind of something to that poetry thing that it has a way of just getting things out there for me.
Yep.
And so I definitely understand like how have gone back to that and you're still using it, for what you're doing.
So there's definitely a power in it, and that was one of the slam poems I did in my wheelchair was called "The Power," and it's specifically about that, about how you've got this thing within you, and if you use it, like if you actually catalyze it into something purposeful,
Yeah.
it resonates with someone. Like, oh, absolutely connect with someone. Someone will hear that one line and be like, oh, yeah, that's how I felt,
Mhm.
or I'm not the only person who's been through that situation. It gives you that room to connect with others.
Yeah.
I think it's really good for that. But one of the main reasons I was sort of drawn to it for a good while was I wasn't in a good place mentally, so I didn't have the mental capacity to do something long form.
Mhm.
Whereas poetry, I can do in bursts.
That's a good point about it, and you can just feel that energy in that instant, and 10 minutes later you have something.
Yep. Like again, I'm a big believer that you should also come back and refine these things,
Sure.
make sure you're happy with it. But the fact that you can do that, and for me, like rhyming's always my brain works in rhymes. It's the weirdest thing.
Hmm.
Rhyming's always been an easy thing for me to do. And when I became a teenager and started listening to rap music, particularly when Eminem came out and the way he sort of rhymes,
Oh yeah.
like that stuck in my head to the point where sometimes I'll write something and not notice that I've done something clever until someone reads it back to me.
Yeah. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, that was good.
It was one line from The Power, and it's like, so the word day means do, right? So day this, day that is do this, do that.
Hmm.
But there's a line in The Power, and it's like, if you can't do it, speak out loud. I promise, mate, some way, somehow, it will resonate with someone around who's felt the way you're feeling now. And it's that a ow. And I didn't do that intentionally.
Yeah.
But you read that back over, like, and it sounds a bit self-congratulatory to say,
Hmm.
"Oh, that was clever of me," but
Hmm.
it was clever. And when I see that, I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? Maybe there's something here." And it's having other people applaud that when you're doing it on stage, or people reaching out saying, "I read this thing and it really, really affected me." Like that just makes you feel so good. And again, it's experience being channeled into something else. So
Hmm.
if I'm going to have sort of one through line for this whole conversation, it would be the value of experience.
Right. No, I totally think that, is such a good way to think of it. And it helps. I mean, I just can't imagine, each time that somebody gets something like whatever it is, some little inspiration, whatever, to keep going or to realize they're not the only ones with those feelings. I think that's just like,
Yep.
it lifts them and, yourself up. But, and that's such a valuable thing, I think, for our community. And even you don't have to be disabled, I don't think, to get something from, what you're writing about. And there's obviously emotions and experiences that able, non-disabled people may have too. So I just think that's, so worthwhile to me. So I really appreciate, you doing that and then, coming on and sharing your story and everything. I think that's, I'm really excited to see what people think of the conversation. And, I'd love to keep kind of in touch and working together on some things, maybe in the future, maybe some poetry collabs or something, who knows, but,
I'll be honest, I've had the idea for a Sons of Dystrophy podcast bouncing about my brain for ages.
yeah.
So when things sort of settled in and work a bit more, it's definitely something I like to do. And you can bet your ass that I'll be reaching out to you.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, if there's anybody else that wants to connect with you, is Instagram kind of the best place to go to reach
Yep,
out? Okay.
definitely Instagram's the best place. So if we're looking for handles, Dystrophy Dad, all one word, or Sons of Dystrophy, again, all one word.
Yeah.
You'll find it there. As you can tell, I like to talk, so once you get me started, I don't tend to stop. But I'm
Yeah.
really into new connections with people and just supporting others within our community because it can feel really isolating at points.
Hmm.
You find someone that you can connect with or someone's experiences that means something to you, it helps you get through it. Ultimately, it's a light, and we all need
Right.
that light.
Absolutely. And your poetry, your first book, is that available on Amazon, or where can people get that?
Just all Amazon platforms. I had to do the whole
Okay.
thing where it's like Canada, etc. Now, the book itself is called Joe Logue Writes because that's what I do, and volume one because it's the first volume. If you do pick it up, some of the poems are quite depressing. I'll be honest with you,
Heavy
but
again. Yeah.
yeah, they're heavy, especially that particular body one. But there is strength in it too, and there's a lot of glimpses of light. And that's one thing I tried to do when I structured the book was, although it starts off in a dark place, show some light within it, because ultimately there is always that light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's probably the takeaway. So remember, there
Perfect.
is a
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds great. Well, I sure appreciate it, Joe, and we'll be in touch. And I look forward to sharing the pod with everybody. So I'll be talking to you soon.
great stuff. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you. Bye.